Okay, we're up to Berachos Daf Yud Beis Amid Aleph, and we're holding 16 lines from the bottom on Yud Aleph Amid Beis. The Mishnah here is describing the Seder Hayom the Beis Hamikdash. So the Kahanim, after they would go ahead and they would shech the Tamid, they would bring the Evarim to the Mizbeach, and they would set it up on the Mizbeach, ready, salted and ready to be burnt. We're picking it over there. Some there would Amar Lehem Hamamuna, the Sagan Kohen Gadol, the one who would take his place on Yom Kippur. He was Tameh. He would say Baruch Hu Becha Achas. He would go to Lishkas Hagazis to the they would daven. Now they didn't have time to daven like we do. And it's very interesting to notice that we say that tefillah is because of the kabbanis. So lest one think that once bisman a kabbanis they did not go ahead and bring kabbanis, but the daven, you see, it's not true, because here we're describing the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. And they did say tefillah, so it's very interesting to note that they're synonymous. They're not necessarily, one replacing the other. So they would go to Lishkas Hagazis. That's the place where the chamber where the Sanhedrin met. And make one bracha. We'll see what that bracha is. And they would make the bracha. The karu aseres hadibis. They would then lay the aseres hadibis. Tomorrow is going to describe why we don't do it. Shema. They'd say Shema. V'hoyim shemoah. Pashvoyim shemoah. Vayomer, and they would say the bracha of Vayomer. Uborcha esa am gimel brachos. They would then go ahead and say three brachas. What are they? Emes v'yatziv, v'avoida ritzei, u'birchas kahanim, and they would say birchas kahanim. Rashi points out. Let's see Rashi of avoida. Bishvul avoida she'asu, because of the avoida they performed in Beis Hamikdash, and mevorchim nachreha ritzei Hashem Elokeinu, avoidas amcha Yisrael, the isha Yisrael svilasam, sakabel baratzon. Baruch HaMakabel Avodas Amo Yisrael Beratzon. They make the bracha HaMakabel, who's Makabel the avodah of this nation Beratzon. Inami Shois Oischel Levatra Biyarad Navoid. So the bracha was a little different than ours, but they would make the bracha of Ritzei, which is the Keneged Avodah. The Berachos Kahanim over here is not Berachos Kahanim. Places points out that it wasn't Berachos Kahanim took place later b'shas the burning of the Torah. So this is like we say in the morning the brachos, the words of Berachos Kahanim, but this was not when the Kahanim were mavorech esa'am. Continues the protocol that they did in the morning. B'Shabbos mosifim berachos achas l'mishma yotza, and to the mishma that went out. We know that there were 24 mishmarim, each one consisting of 6 batei avos. Each one would work one day of the week, and they would go ahead and work on Shabbos. And b'shas the burning of Musaf, they would switch at that time. So the one going out would give a bracha to the one coming in at that time, right? And a bracha, and we'll see what that bracha is. So now going back over the Baisa, it says, "My bracha achas." What's the bracha achas? That again they had this abridged version of tefillah for the kahanim that have to do the avodah. They don't have time to daven like we do. What was the bracha achas that they made in the Lishkas Hagazis? Kihod the Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Igloila, who asked, so they came to this place. Boy, minayo, my bracha achas. What's the bracha achas that the kahanim would make? They have to be a dayo, they did not know. They came to end the Masna, and lo and behold, they have a biyade, they didn't know Rav Masna Narida. Also, Shailu Rav Yehuda, Amalahu Hachiyam Shmuel, Rav Yehuda said the name of Shmuel, Rav Yehuda learned by Rabbi and Shmuel lovingly called him Shinana, Ahava Rabba. They said the bracha, again, they're going to Kriya Shema, they said one bracha, Birchas Achas, one of the brachas of Kriya Shema, and which one was it? It was the second bracha, the bracha of Ahava Rabba. Am Rav Zvika, Am Rav Ami, Am Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Yitzar, it's the first bracha of Kriya Shema in the Shal Shachris. Yitzar. Kiyasar Yitzar Yosef Amar Had Reb Zrika. The Reb Zrika said they made the bracha of Yitzar. Lav b'feirush itmar. We did not hear it from him explicitly. El mechola itmar, but from Sak he gave, we inferred it that he said the bracha of Yitzar and not Avarabba. Am Reb Zrika, Am Reb Ami, Am Reb Shimon ben Lakish. So in Meres, we see from this incident of the Kahanim where they would go ahead and daven. That brachos aim akvasuizu, that brachos are not ma'akiv each other. In other words, there are 2 brachos instead before Kriya Shema Shal Shachris. That if one does not say bracha, both brachos, they're not ma'akiv, and it'll be okay. Now, iyam b'shnei yitzar, that the bracha they said was yitzar, and they did not say avarava, ahavi amri hainu de bracha achas emakavizuazu. Right? They said yitzar. And look on the Avarabba, and he said Shema. So you see, it's not Ma'akiv, the Kriya Shema with the brachas. El Iyam and Avarabba, if they would say the second bracha Avarabba and not Yitzar, Havi Amri, they would say Ma brachas and Ma'akiv Zuazu. What is the raya that brachas are not akuzu zu? Dilma haid loyama yitzar. The first bracha mishum deloy matis man yitzar. Again, they said it earlier with. So anyone who was yitzar, the creation of it, the Berachos of the Mishma, they weren't yitzar because they said it before the time. So maybe they didn't say yitzar ma'oires simply because it was not this amount of yitzar ma'oires. So you would not have a raya that brachas akuzu. Maybe they would be, but again, the fact that you can't say yitzar is obviously must be they say yitzar, and you have a raya that they didn't say avarabba, that brachas ein ma'akvas zu esu. And in fact, when they would reach this man of yitzar, they would say it. So the brachas would be ma'akim. They say both. It says the Gemara, my, right, and so la meferishim el mechala itmar. And what if they would have heard this din michlala? Michlala, loyal might say avarabba haviyami. They'd say avarabba and not yitzar. The one bracha was avarabba. The chimatis man yitzar haviyami. Then would say it. Well, my brachas name akvazu say that brachas. That the order of the brachas not ma'akv each other, but you would have to say both. But the order is lav dafka. Mashenkin, if you heard the favorish, you only say one, then you know only one. Michlala, you might say two, but the order is not ma'akv, but you need two. The two would be ma'akv, failure to say both. But if you heard of favorish, then what? Only one would be ma'akv. That would be the nafkamina, by hearing mafurishly, openly, rather than just inferring from a psak. Now, going back over the protocol of the Anshe Mishmar, what they did. So they said bircha achas, and that was the machloikis, whether it was yitzar or avarabba. And we have koiro aser sedibis, shema, v'hoyim shmoa, v'yom emes v'yatziv, v'avoida ritzei, and birchas kahanim. Amar Yeshua Amar Shmuel. After Gvulin, Bikshu Likros came. Even in the Gvulin, they wanted to say aser sedibis. Like the first time you learned this Gemara, you say to yourself, like, why aren't they saying the Aseret Dibris? If it's why aren't they saying it? Why don't we say the Aseret Dibris? If that was what they said, why not institute it that we should say every day Aseret Dibris? Says the Gemara, Elishek Far Bitlum, Nifnei Tarumas Haminim. They will battle it because of the Tarumas Haminim. Rashi says, Shla Yomru La'ame Oretz. The Minim, the Koifrim would say to them, Ratzim. Ein shar Torah emes. The rest of the Torah is not true. The Tedu shein koirin elamash amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu the shama mi Sinai. Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah is called Torah's Moshe. We believe Moshe as a Navi of Hashem, and everything that Moshe told us is true. We didn't hear the whole Torah at Sinai Pashtus. We heard the Aseret Dibris. So if you're a min, you want to convince Nam Aretz, if you'd say, what's the whole thing you're saying by tefillah? You're saying Aseret Dibris. Why are you stressing that? Because that's the only thing that's true. So to avoid the complaint or the tricks of the minim that could go ahead and possibly influence the amaratzim that the rest of the Torah is not true, we did not say Aseret Dibris b'gvulin outside the Beis Hamikdash. El says Gemara Tanya Mihochi, the same few cases like this. In the Gvul and outside the Beis Hamikdash, they desired to go ahead and institute to say Aseret Dibris. They went ahead and mevatel this. I guess mevatel in the Beis Hamikdash because Tarumas Aminim. And Rabbi Achana Saval Mekvinu. And I'm telling you, this Rabbi, these were all after the Churban Bayis. So it means Pashtus. It means that they were mevatel earlier. Rabbi Rav Chana Savan Mekminu Besura in the town of Surah to say that Aseret Dibris only of Christa for bottom of Nei Tarumas Aminim, and this already has been nullified because of Tarumas Aminim. Amei Savan Mekminu Ben Ador. You see how important the Aseret Dibris is. People, these Gedoli Amaroyim want to institute it. We're not kaiveya in the day of tefillah because already that was mevatel the Torah me Tarumas Aminim. Ubeshavas Mosivim Bracha Achas the Mishma Yaitza. So again, at the time of they would burn the zikin and in the afternoon, the pimated lechem upon him, and at that time they would switch, and 6 of the lechem upon him were given to the ones going out, the mishma going out, and 6 going in. Right. So my bracha achas. What's the bracha achas that the ones that were going going in, we give to the one going out? Mishma yoytzo emel mishma nichnis. Right. Excuse me. That's the opposite. The mishma going out, we give to the one coming in. The one who go ahead and rest his countenance on this house, his shame on this house, he should go ahead and reside among you. So give a bracha, birchas hedyot of shalom, achva v'reigas. Welcome Shem laharich. The Mishnah concluded a place there kimarich ein ratzoi laharich. In other words, a short bracha you can make a long one. Pshita and Alam the Shashayla. Heked the Kanakit Kasa the Chamra Biyada, where a person's holding a bracha, a kais of Chamra in his hands. We're going to go with the Shita of Rashi to explain this Gemara. He's holding a bracha of Chamra in his hands, and he's supposed to make a Bar Pia Gafen, Ukasava, the Shikra, and he thought it was beer, which he makes Shahakol, Upasach Mavarach Adaite the Shikra. And he went ahead and he said, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvos b'tzivanu. And this whole time he's thinking it's what? It's Sheikhar. He's thinking what? That it is beer. B'sayim b'chamra. However, when he concludes, he says, Boyer Priagafen, Yatza, it's Yatza the mitzvah. The Nami Imama Shahakol Niyebivaroi was even if he'd say Shahakol Niyebivaroi, he'd also be Yatza. In other words, it's a win-win situation. What he thought would be Yotza, because the shachal and wine does work, and what he said was the correct bracha does work. So whether you go after the psicha of the bracha, what he had in mind when he started making the bracha, when he said the shame, and what he said physically in the end, either way, he would be Yotza the mitzvah on wine, either through the shahakal or the chatchila hagofen. The yama shachal yadvar Yotza, the tanan. Al kulam and all beverages, the mamasha kol niyebivaro yaitza. Ela hechad the konakat kisa the shachra biyadei. Let's say he's holding a kais of beer in his hand, because of the chamrahu, and he thinks that it's wine, and he says Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, and he has in mind shahakol, right? He has in mind hagofen. He has in mind hagofen on the beer, and Baruch hagofen can't be see the beer, right? Baruch Adaiti the chamra, the sayim the shechra, but he ended shahakol niyebivaro. What's the din? Basa ikka bracha azlinon. Before we go at the beginning of the bracha, what he had in mind, and therefore, since he had in mind a boy priya gofen on beer, he's not yaitza. Basa chasima azlinon, when he in fact said shahakol niyeh. So in other words, when he says akelim melech haolam, is that the ikka bracha? Or is the chasima the ikka bracha? That's the lam the shayla. Pashma, let's try to be pasha the shayla. Shachris pasach b'yaitza or. In the morning, he says yaitza or umvari chayshech yaitza shalom u'bayis hakol. However, the sign been by Ravim, he said Asher Kiddushanim Mitzvos Asher B'Dvarim Ravim. Instead of saying Yitzhar, right? In other words, in the beginning of the bracha, instead of saying Yitzhar, he said Asher B'Dvarim Ravim. Well, Yitzhar, he's not Yitzhar. That's in the morning. Pasach B'Marvis Aravis, the sign B'Yitzhar in the evening. He starts off with Ravim, and he's Messiah B'Yitzhar. Yitzhar, he be Yitzhar. Arvis Pasach B'Marvis. Excuse me, I said that wrong. Tashma, one more time. Shachris Pasach b'Yitzhar b'Sayim b'Mayav Aravim l'Yatza. However, Pasach b'Mayav Aravim began by Shachris, by saying Mayav Aravim, b'Sayim b'Yitzhar Yatza. So Pashtus, you're going after the end of the bracha. Arvis Pasach b'Mayav Aravim, which was the correct bracha, b'Sayim b'Yitzhar, and he said Yitzhar l'Yatza. Pasach b'Yitzhar, however, began the bracha b'Yitzhar, b'Sayim b'Mayav Aravim, and he concluded Mayav Aravim. Again, this is the beginning of the bracha according to Rashi. Then Yatza. What's the cloud we see from these two things? Everything goes after the conclusion. So if I began by Ma'ariv, by Yitzhar, as long as I finish my Baravim, if I began by Shachris by saying Ma'ariv Baravim and I concluded Yitzhar, you'll be Yitzhar. So too, let's be Paisha Shaila over here. As long when you went ahead and you had a cup of beer and you wanted to say Bar Priyagofen, but you included Shahakol, then you should be Yitzhar. Says the Gemara, Shiny Hasam, the Kama Baruch Yitzhar Hama'iris. Maybe there it's different because you concluded the end of the bracha, you concluded Yitzhar Hama'iris. So maybe you can't be right to Berachos Hanen, because Berachos Hanen you don't have a chasimah to the bracha. But maybe Yehoyad chasimah to the bracha of Yitzhar Hama'iris goes ahead and clears up anything in the beginning. Any bracha that doesn't have a karas Hashem, you can make it up. So Baruch Hashem Yitzhar Hama'iris. So the fact that the end of bracha doesn't have Shem Malchus, just says you have no Melech Olam, you just have the Shem of Hashem is a bracha. So Mamela, that end bracha could be mitzi my incorrection in the beginning. El Rabbi Yochanan Damar, Kol bracha Shem Malchus. Ain't a bracha that doesn't have the Shem Malchus, meaning Melech Olam. Ain't a bracha Mayik Lameimo. You can't possibly go ahead and say that what it's the Yitzhar Hama'iris that you say at the end to go ahead and correct your mistake in the beginning. So let's be Paisha the Shaila in Achinami that a Kol Halil Machachasima, and therefore if you say Shahakal, even though you had a mind like Gofen on beer, you'd be Yitzhar. Ella, you have a good raya. Ella, I'll tell you why it's not a good raya. Kim the Amar Rabbi Bar Ula. We had a Gemara earlier. Why do we say the lashon of Choshech? We have the lashon of Noiga. Noiga would have been a lashon Ma'alya, lashon of twilight. Choshech has a connotation of evil. So the reason we said it is we want to go along with we want to go ahead and mention by daytime, nighttime, and nighttime by day. We wanted to mention that. Okay. So Mela Ken Zain, when I made the bracha Yitzim Iris and I had a mistake in the beginning, it's koil, it's nichla on that because you want to go ahead and include the chayshech or and the bracha of or you want to include the chayshech, right? Therefore, it's not a mistake. When you said it in the beginning, it's also going on the end of the bracha where you wanted to go ahead and finish it correctly. But however, when it comes to Bechas Hanena, where certainly it's only a one-shot deal, nothing that you're mentioning of Chayshech and Or and Chayshech, maybe you're not Yoitza. So you want to push the Shaila. Pashma, let's try again. We say for Kol Shel Dava, HaKol Hoylach Acha HaChisum, everything goes after the Chisum, everything goes after what the conclusion. That was what the Brisa concluded. Kol Shel Dava L'Suyi Mai, Lav L'Suyi Hodam Moron, where you have a cup of beer and you want to say a gofen and you end up saying Shahakol, that you go after the Chisum. Loi, the case of what? Of bread and dates. What's exactly the case of bread and dates? You ate bread, you could serve it the time and you thought it was dates, and you want and what? So you made the ochel because of the time ochel that this is going on the nach bracha. If you ate bread and you thought you ate dates, and you began saying eights. With the hammer, but you ended up benching. I know, that's our buyer. That's our question. That's exactly our question. You go after the beginning, what you began, that you said that you wanted to say the eights al priya, eights of alamechia, and you ended up benching. So too, you wanted to say what shahakol, and you end up saying bar priya gofen in the beginning. And so therefore, you push it this, then you could push it ashayla. Let's see if you go in the ochel tamre because of a nama. You ate dates and you thought it was bread. So nama ochel. You started off benching and you ended up with ala eights off your eights. Yotza you be yotza. You know why? I feel the same with the nama. If you bench on dates, nami yotza. My timer, the tamri nami mason zayin. And timer also is hadzonas akol. They also have that capacity. So mela, the kol asuyimai, you go after the chisum, is that you thought you began benching, you began saying al eights be eights, and then you end up benching. That would work because you could bench on dates. Mashen came by shalman, but it's not a good sushtel. Therefore, you can't be pushed to the shaila. It means in the Bible leadership. It's very important psak over here. We have a concept of safek brachas lahakol. So why would you have to make another bracha? And the answer is we don't say safek the brachas by bechas hanenen, because since the person who goes ahead and eats from this world, who's nana from this world, without making a bracha, is like a gazlin. So we don't say the concept of safek brachas lahakol. It's a very important. I'm not sure to know. Omar Rav Rach Ichen Saba Mishmei the Rav. Kol Shlei Omer Emes V'Yatziv Shachris the Emes V'Amun of Arvis LaYotzi the Chavasi not Yotzot Shnemar LaHagid B'Boker Chasdecha to go ahead tell over in the Chesed in the morning the Munascha Ba'Leilas and Muna in the evening. Beautiful Mashah. Pshatim over here is that Ba'Boker Chasdecha we speak about what you did about Yitzias Mitzrayim. Munascha Ba'Leilas we're speaking about the future. We speak about the future La'asid when you will be finally take us out of this bitter gullus. When a person davens, when he bows down in the beginning, Berachos by Moedim, because he bows down like when he says Baruch. When he says Hashem, he goes up. He stands up by the Shem. My time of the Rav, Hashem Zoykif Kafuf. Hashem is Zoykif Kafufim. Therefore, when you say Hashem, he's Zoykif. He straightens up. That's what Ben. It says nachas. It says what? When you say my name, nachas, you should be what? Nachas. You should be humble. Bashmi, don't stand up. It says miksiv b'shmi. Does it say in my name? Or mifnei shmi ksiv? It says before my name. Before my name, you should be humble, which is true. Baruch, you're humble. When you say your name, you go up. Amay Shmuel Barav Bar Uriah, the son of the warrior in Torah. Hey, Emel Chamilsam Al Sidama Abucha. Let me I'll tell you something that your father said. When you go ahead and bow, when you stand up, stand up when you render the same Hashem. When you go down, you go down like a stick, and you go up like a snake. You ever see cobras coming out of the snakes? They stand up, their heads come up before their bodies. The whole days of the year, a person spalal kel kodesh. Melech Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat. Puts me Aseres Yom Shemin Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim. Shemispalo HaMelech HaKadosh VaMelech HaMishpat. You say Melech HaKadosh, Melech HaPishpat. Afilu Omar Kel HaKadosh Yotzah. We don't pass it like that. Shnemar Vayigu Hashem Tzedakah the Mishpat. Hashem Tzedakah is elevated in Mishpat. Kel HaKadosh Nikdash B'Tzedakah. And the Almighty Hashem is sanctified in Tzedakah. Amos Vayigu Hashem Tzedakah the Mishpat. When is HaKadosh Baruch Hu gone ahead and elevated? Eila Aseres Yom Shemin Yom Kippur. The Kama Kel HaKadosh. I have it. What's the bottom line? Amar Yosef HaKel HaKadosh. Melech Oyev Tzedakah Mishpat. Rabbi Omar Melech HaKadosh. VaMelech HaMishpat. VaLacha Hilchos HaKarabah. Tosis brings that you should even say, let's see Tosis for a second. The Hilchos HaKarabah the Rabbah the Tzarech Lachloim HaMelech HaKadosh VaMelech HaMishpat. And Loi Omar Machzir Naisai. If you don't say that, you go back. The Chain Zachrenu. So Zachrenu Nikumoich at the beginning because of the L'Chaim Sefer L'Chaim Machzir Naisai in Loi Omar. Now we don't pass them like that. We don't by Zachrenu and Mikumoicha. We don't pass them like that. In fact, HaMelech HaMishpat, we also don't pass them like that. We said since you mentioned HaMelech, you Melech HaTzedakah Mishpat, you mentioned Melech HaMishpat, you don't have to go back. The only place you'd have to go back is if you say HaKel HaKadosh instead of saying HaMelech HaMishpat. Here's the dash. Rabbi Rav Chana Saba Mishmei Rav. Again, we're getting all the members of Rabbi Rav Chana Saba name of Rav. Kol she'efshar levakesh rachman al chaveiroi. Anyone who's possible to ask rachmanas on his friend, ve'enim levakesh, and he doesn't, mikra chayta. In other words, if you can daven to someone and you don't, you call the chayta. Shinemar. I mean, this background over here, Shmuel Hanavi is given to Chachav Pnei Yisrael for asking for a king because he could have gone ahead one and with his leadership and tefillah protected them. It wasn't the time of asking for a king. So he says, Gam anochi chalilim mechatel Hashem mechadel espalo ba'atchem. Chas v'shalom that I should not be considered a sinner to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from stopping to daven for you. So you see, if I could daven for you and I don't, I'm full of chayta. Amar Rava im Talmud Chacham who not only if the person who is a Talmud Chacham, the person you're davening for is a Talmud Chacham. He has to mamish make himself sick over it. I time ilim mishum nechsib. Ve'ein choyli michem alai v'goyle esazni. Shaul is saying none of you will make yourself sick over me to reveal the location of David. You tell me Melech shiny. Maybe for a Melech you have to make yourself sick, but not for Talmud Chacham. David writes when he's speaking about Achitophel and Doeg, tremendous Talmidei Chachamim who went off. It says Vanochi b'chaloisam levushi, and you know that he said b'chaloisam. See that in his sickness that he would daven for Abimelech, and David wasn't a king yet. If David was a king, it doesn't make a difference. The king is davening for them. Again, the question is who you're davening for. Anyone who does an Avera and is bad and is embarrassed about that, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is I guess the busha of doing an Avera is it's not guilt, it's embarrassment. Guilt is not tshuva. Guilt is not tshuva. Busha is tshuva. Embarrassed, meaning, how could I have done it to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Guilt is that you caught me. I feel guilty that you caught me. I feel guilty. Guilt is not tshuva. Very important, Rabbi say that busha, feeling that how can I go ahead? Hashem, that you get the feel for Hashem. Lemantiskri, v'voish v'layir lecha avon oy pismen pemefei kilimasech v'chapilach kolasher sisnu Hashem Elokim. So the third, yeah, you see that you feel embarrassed about it, you're fine. It says no, on the right, don't see the shiny. This is speaking about the tzibur, but maybe individual not. So we're going to learn now from Shaul. Okay, the incident, the background of the incident of this is the Seif Yom Shaul is going to battle against the Plishtim, and he doesn't know what to do. He's petrified, and he calls up Shmuel from the dead. A very, very famous incident in Shmuel Beis in Perik Chavches. He goes to Balasov of Eindor. He calls him up, and he calls up Shmuel. And in the conversation, Shmuel, you see that Shaul in the words he says to Shmuel, you see that he was embarrassed that he didn't have error. So he asked for all the normal ways to ask about the future. It wasn't answered. So he felt he had compelled to call up Shmuel. Why did you star me from my makam of keber to bring me up? Shaul says to Shmuel, I'm very, very in pain. Polishtim are going to war against me. Hashem saw me, Hashem has left me. And doesn't answer me anymore. Gambi out of Nevi'im, I asked Nevi'im what's going to happen. Gamba Chaloim, I say, I took a piece of paper and I put the Shem of Mefarish underneath my head, and I wasn't answering the Chaloim. That used to be a means of finding out the future. And I'm calling you up, Shmuel. I said, what should I do? Right? He didn't mention that he didn't from him. Because he had killed that Noiver Kahanim. Actually, it was Doeg who killed that Noiv Achimatz helping David, and therefore he was embarrassed that he did, so he didn't ask the Tumim. Okay. Now Shmuel tells him to go to battle and die in battle, and Macharat V'Nachimi says, tomorrow you'll be with me. How do you know? Shmuel says to Shaul, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. You'll be in the same mechitza as I am. It's an unbelievable incident. People don't realize how the greatness of Shaul. People think Shaul is a murderer, chasing after David, murders cities, melancholy, depressed. Shaul was an unbelievable tzaddik. He was not a good king, but he was unbelievable tzaddik. He was a failure as a king. He listened to the people. But as a tzaddik, there was like, why? He's the same mechitza as me. David writes in Tehillim, Moshe v'Aaron b'koyhanav, u'Shmuel b'koyrin Shmai. Koyrach saw this. He said, "What? I have a descendant Shmuel who's equal to Moshe v'Aaron, and I, the forefather, shouldn't be equal to Moshe v'Aaron." So you see that Shmuel was equal to Moshe v'Aaron. So can you imagine Shmuel is with Abba, and who's there with him? Shaul. I'll leave you with a question. If Hirkis Tani, if he just moved him up from the kever, he had 12 months to be called to the Yemadin. So how could he say you're going to be in the same chelik of Elam Haba as me? If you didn't have the Yemadin, then how do you know where he's going to be? You have to wait for future shiurim for the answer. That there's a rav at the end of David's days, because the Shaul killed out the Gevonim. The Gevonim they had lied. They dressed up as people from a faraway nation. They were from the Zionumis. Yeshua swears to them, and Yeshua the toys. He makes them water carriers and wood choppers for the Kahanim. Shaul kills out no Kahanim. They have no people to be supported from, and as a result, there's a rav. And David asks and finds out the rav is because of what Shaul did to the Gevonim. He goes there, tells the Gevonim, "What do you want? What do you want? I'll do anything for you to stop this terrible famine." And the Gemara in Ayin Tes Ayin Ches and Yevamos tells us that these Gevonim, their mamish were shoyim gemurim. They mamish did not want anything but revenge. They wanted to take revenge on Shaul's descendants. David literally could have offered them a king's ransom. He was a king. He offered them everything. And all they wanted was revenge. And they were guys that then David said, the Gevonim, Einam livnei Yisrael heim. Anu b'shanam rachman v'godol chasonim heimeinam. Says the Gemara. It says B'cher Hashem. Yotze Baskel v'Oma B'cher Hashem. Baskel comes out and says the chosen of Hashem. So you see that Shaul was forgiven, because despite what he did to Nov, he's called B'cher Hashem. Amar Bo ben Sutrasi. Amar Yehuda bar Zavna. Bikesh l'kfoya Pashas Balak v'Kriyashma. They wanted to put the Pasha of Balak in Kriyashma. If they malay kavua, why won't they cover in Kriyashma? Mishum terech tzibah. It's too long. Then terech tzibah to read it. My time, what's the reason? What's the reason they want to be kaveid? And that's the whole reason. So Lema might say the Parshas Ribis, where it mentions Tziyas Mitzrayim. Parshas Mishkolis, the Parsha of keeping true weights and measurements. Ella must be another reason. Ella Rabbi Yosef Barabin, Mishum Dechsiv Ba Haikra Kora Shochav Kari Uchalavi Miyukimeno. So since we're mentioning Shchiva, this man of Shchiva of Shachmacha, Miyukimeno Bekumecha. So L'chayra, the Priyashma, the mitzvah is man Shchiva, man Kima. So L'chayra or B'Shach Bekumecha. At the time of that, or we're literally lying down like Beshamai, we should mention this parsha of Balak. So again, if the whole reason is Tirchad Tzibura, just put that pasuk in, that will be enough. After the Gemara, Gemiri called Pasha the Pasuk Moshe Rabbeinu Paskina. Delay Pasuk Moshe, delay Paskina. You don't go ahead and break up Parshas. Moshe broke them up for us. Whatever he broke up, we broke up. You can make your own cut and paste. Pashas Tzitzis may not cover. Well, why would they convey Pashas Tzitzis in Kriya Shema? Again, it's just a Shalom Kamecha with the Chacham decided what to put in there. Somebody Yehuda Bar Chaviva, Sheyesh B'Chamisha Devarim. Mitzvahs Tzitzis 1, Mitzvahs Yisrael 2, oil mitzvahs 3, das minim 4, Hura Vera 5, the Hura Vaidazara 6. Okay, said 5, this is 6. Especially in Mahani class, the fashion or the 3 are clearly visible. All mitzvahs t'chsev, you see your mitzvahs, your tzitzis. There's a chatim, it's called mitzvahs Hashem. Tzitzis t'chsev, you also learn tzitzis. Tzitzis Ryan t'chsev, Asher tzitzis, Kamer tzitzrayim. Well, that's meaning the hero Avera, the hero of the army. Now, let's count that as 1. The Tanya after Levapim is minus. If you go after your heart, that's minus. V'chein oimer, I'm a novel beliboy enel lakim. So you see that it says enel lakim minus is the kaifin Hashem is beliboy. Achrei nechem zu hero Avera, you go after Avera. Shnemar by Yom Shimshon Alaviv, when he decided to marry this woman who is not of Jewish descent. So you see, going after Be'enai could be the type. Of course, Shimshon wanted to go ahead. His mother and father did not know. He was looking for a personal and the dead against the Pelishtim. Bez Hashem will get the Sech the Saita. We'll speak this after Berachos. But basically, Shimshon was looking for a reason to go ahead and fight against the Pelishtim. The Rambam in Yud Gimel from Yisuri Bia says clearly the greatness of Shimshon. He called him Shimshon Mashiach Shel Yisrael, not Shimshon Agiba, Shimshon Mashiach Shel Yisrael. Says the Gemara Vayta. Let's conclude. But it says. Shnei Avayim Shimshon Levov Oyster Kachli Kihu Yashav Einai Atem Zaynim Zehira Avodah V'chein Oimer V'yiznu Achrei Ba'olim, and you were drawn after the Ba'olim. I will stop over here. Have a great day.